Hi again from the World Bank IMF annual meetings. My colleague, Matt Kendrick, who is a senior writer for GZERO Daily, is here. I know you've been on the ground, as I have a bit, this week. It's funny, we were talking about how at a press conference, the World Bank president, Ajay Banga, made a big point of saying, we're not talking about the US election. You know, Donald Trump is not really in our internal meetings right now. Well, he's everywhere else here.
That's right.
What specifically have you been hearing from attendees and delegates here?
Yeah, there's two different tracks of what I've been hearing. One is in an official capacity where there are cameras on, and for example, the finance minister of the Philippines tells me, I'm not worried about Donald Trump because the Philippines and the US have a strong alliance. Marcos and Trump get along very well, and we're going to be just fine even if there are trade tensions, even if there is inflationary pressure. And frankly, I doubt that because we've seen how Donald Trump handles alliances, and we've seen the way he approaches trade deficits. And so I think internally, what I've been hearing from folks when the cameras are off, and it's just me and them, is that those inflationary pressures undermine this rosy assessment of the world economy that the IMF and World Bank have put out. And that if Trump really does carry through on trade tariffs, particularly on China, the headwinds that would create for middle income economies, Brazil, South Africa, Mexico, those kind of countries, would be quite severe and would drag down global growth from this mediocre 3.2% down into something where we're actually getting really worried, particularly with the debt problems going around. So overall, in private, a lot of concern. In public, some pretty brave faces when it comes to Trump.
And that notion of growth being slow but sort of stable right now is really coming with a big but.
Yeah.
If the war in the Middle East were to expand, for example, and have beyond regional consequences, right? So there are so many kind of global pain points that they're focused on here.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what you're hearing about the big concerns this week.
Yeah, I think you pointed to an interesting one with the Middle East because obviously the concern there is oil and gas prices, fuel prices, energy going up. We haven't seen that happen over the last year, and that's in part because of the weakness of China's economy. People aren't consuming the fuel that they would otherwise if the economy was stronger. There's roiling debt problems in the property market that the government is attempting to address with stimulus. Hasn't really found a way to get people out there with confidence buying houses again, which is very important in China. And as a result, overall economic productivity is lower, demand for oil is lower, and we in the United States are seeing relatively low gasoline prices, even though there's an active war in the Middle East that blocks one of the major shipping routes, the Red Sea, for oil. So if that were to change, let's say that Iran becomes more deeply involved and even more oil is taken off the market, yeah, that could be a severe problem. But I think that the real anxiety comes around China's inability to find a level of stimulus that will bring its economy back on track. And the World Economic Outlook specifically says that if China underperforms, does not meet the assumptions that are laid into there, then we see a darker picture. So kind of a worst case scenario for this particular World Economic Outlook would be a Trump victory leading to inflationary pressure from the United States, coupled with an inability in Beijing to stimulate their economy enough to kind of make up for that gap. Both of those things happen. I think that 3.2% is very unlikely in the next year. Yeah.
There are also bright spots, by the way, this week. Some Asian economies have been overperforming for sure. What else are you hearing about sort of reasons to be positive right now? Because I think we all need some.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I just attended a session with the central bank chief of Ukraine, who managed to pass their 5th IMF review, which they've never done before. The IMF plays a really crucial part in sustaining the monetary policy of Ukraine, making sure that capital reserves are there so that the currency holds value and imports and exports can flow freely. Ukraine, in order to achieve this and meet that review, had to implement a lot of reforms. And one of the really interesting ones, when I asked the central bank chief about corruption in particular, he said it starts with reducing panic. So in the initial days, communicating very clearly that we're in charge, we're taking care of your money. You don't have to feel like desperate, like you're going to steal something, but then it continues with supporting your people afterwards. So he talked about how the central bank in Kyiv has an area for childcare. And if you are a parent and you need to work and you're afraid that a Russian missile might strike and there's a blackout, you need to have your kid around, you bring him to the central bank. And he said he loves to hear the sounds of children running around there. So I think that stands out as both an innovative process and a success story of relieving some really problematic elements of embezzlement that had previously existed in Ukraine. The other big success story I've been hearing is related to Africa. Two there, really. One is the electrification project that was announced earlier this year at the spring meetings. If I'm not mistaken, $750 million has already been dispersed in Nigeria alone to create rooftop solar and mini grids that will bring electricity to 18 million people in Africa's largest country by population. And there's, I think, 11 more projects, or 15 more projects in 11 countries that have been funded through this electrification. Then the other one is Somalia. We always think of Somalia as kind of a basket case country, riddled with war, unstable, and yet they were able to discharge 90% of their sovereign debt through an IMF program called the Highly Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, which, similar to what happened in Ukraine, required the establishment of a proper functioning system, tax revenues, making sure that you're accounting for everything. That's really hard, and Somalia did it. And they were able, as a result, to take the burden off of their own people for generations.
Matt Kendrick, thanks so much.
Thank you, Tony.